I took the job because I needed to disappear for a while. Not dramatically, just enough to stop checking my phone every 11 minutes and wondering if my ex would text. The posting appeared on a remote work forum I'd joined during a 3 a.m. spiral. House sitter needed. 4 weeks winter Rockies 800 plus solitude. The owner, a man named Hatcher, was rehabbing a knee in Denver and needed someone to keep the pipes from freezing and the wood stove fed. I'm a freelance illustrator. My deliverables are digital. I can work anywhere with Wi-Fi, and this place promised satellite internet and a silence I hadn't felt in years. The drive up took 6 hours, the last 40 minutes on a Forest Service road that switchbacked through stands of blue spruce and granite slabs, the size of shipping containers. The cabin sat at 9,200 feet in a bowl-shaped basin, ringed by cliffs on 3 sides, and open to the south where a frozen tarn lay like a blind eye. The structure itself was handsome in an old, functional way, steep-pitched roof to shed snow, wrap-around porch with a railing worn smooth by decades of gloves, and a cast-iron bell hanging under the eave near the door. The bell had a pull cord, but it looked rusted shut. Inside, the place smelled like cedar, old wool, and something faintly mineral, maybe the well water. A wood stove dominated the main room, its belly already loaded with kindling and a note taped to the grate. Start with newspaper, crack the flue, don't rush it. The kitchen was small and tidy. Hand-labeled mason jars lined a shelf, rice, lentils, tea, sugar, and a percolator sat on a 2-burner propane range. The furniture was Spartan but well made. A table with 2 chairs, a sofa with a patchwork quilt, a narrow bed in the loft accessible by a ladder with rungs polished to a dull gleam. On the kitchen table sat a ledger, the old-fashioned kind with a marbled cover and sewn binding. Next to it, taped flat with yellowed Scotch tape, was a sealed envelope. The words on it were typed, not handwritten. Rules, read twice. I laughed. I actually laughed out loud, the sound flat and strange in the empty cabin. I expected instructions about septic idiosyncrasies, or reminders to lock up against bears. Instead, when I peeled open the envelope, I found a single sheet of paper with 5 numbered entries. After sunset, do not step off the porch unless the bell has rung exactly twice. If you hear chains from the timberline, turn on the porch light and count to 40. Do not look down the path until you finish. Between 2:12 to 2:18 a.m., do not look into the windows. Close your eyes if you must pass. Leave bread on the stump by the woodpile every dawn. Never on the railing. If a hiker asks for your name at night, say I am a guest. Nothing more. I read it twice as instructed. Then took a photo with my phone and texted it to my best friend Rio with the caption, Mountain Gothic Realness. Owner is either a genius or unhinged. I set the paper on the corkboard above the table, securing it with a thumbtack, and told myself I'd follow the rules just enough to feel appropriately silly about it later. The alpine air that first afternoon felt glassy, thin in a way that made my heartbeat louder in my ears. The silence wasn't empty, it had layers. There was the creak of the cabin settling, the occasional crack of ice on the tarn, and beneath it all a kind of low-frequency hum I assumed was wind threading through the cliffs. I unpacked my duffel, set up my tablet and stylus on the table, and started a fire in the stove using Hatcher's careful instructions. The flames caught quickly, and the heat rolled out in waves that smelled like pitch and old iron. By the time the sun dropped behind the western ridge, the temperature inside had climbed to something almost cozy. Outside, the light went from gold to violet to a blue so deep it felt like drowning. I made tea, ate a granola bar, and sketched the view from the window. The tarn, the cliffs, the dark fringe of trees at the timberline. My children's book, about a fox learning to navigate a forest by listening instead of seeing, had stalled for months, but up here the quiet felt generative. I thought I might actually finish it. At some point I glanced at the clock. 7:43 p.m. The sun had been down for over an hour. I was still on the porch. No, I was inside. I'd stepped out briefly to bring in more firewood, but that had been before sunset. I was sure of it. Almost sure. That's when the bell rang. 2 strikes clean and brass bright, separated by a breath. The sound wasn't loud, but it traveled through the cabin timbers like a tuning fork pressed to bone. I froze, pencil hovering over my sketchpad. The fire popped. Somewhere in the loft a board creaked, as if adjusting to a new weight. I stood, walked to the door and looked through the window. The porch light. I didn't remember turning it on, glowed in amber cones over fresh snow. Beyond the railing, the night was a wall. I checked the rules again, though I'd already memorized them in the half-mocking way you memorize a joke. After sunset, do not step off the porch unless the bell has rung exactly twice. It had rung twice. I opened the door. Cold air poured in, sharp enough to sting my sinuses. I stepped onto the porch. The boards were solid under my boots, and the snow held my weight with a crisp suck that reminded me of biting into an apple. I stood there, breath clouding, and listened. From somewhere near the timberline, maybe a quarter-mile up the slope, came a sound I can only describe as chains. Not dragged, not dropped, sifted, like someone running gloved fingers through a palmful of heavy beads, letting them clink and slide and fall. I reached back through the door and flicked the porch light switch, even though the light was already on. The bulb flickered once, then steadied. I started counting out loud, my voice smaller than I wanted it to be. 1, 2, 3. The chain sound didn't stop. It shifted, maybe, moving laterally across the slope. 12, 13, 14, my breath came faster. I kept my eyes on the far edge of the porch light's reach, where the snow met the dark. 29, 30, 31. At 37, the chain sound slid uphill, away from the cabin, fading into the high silence. At 40, I stopped counting. The night reset itself. Wind resumed, the far-off crack of ice, the hum beneath it all. Ordinary, or ordinary enough. I stepped back inside, locked the door, and laughed shakily. I told myself it was probably a section of deer fencing caught in the wind, or an old hitching ring on a tree, or ice shifting in a crevasse. The mountains were full of sounds that seemed impossible until you learned their sources. I didn't think about the bell. Not yet. Later, after I'd banked the fire and climbed to the loft, I passed the kitchen window on the way to brush my teeth. The clock read 2:14 a.m. I glanced at the dark glass without thinking, just a flicker of a look, and saw my reflection smile. I wasn't smiling. I yanked my eyes shut, stumbled backward, and hit the loft ladder hard enough to bruise my shoulder. I kept my eyes closed until I was in bed, quilt pulled up to my chin, heart punching against my ribs. In the morning, I told myself it had been a trick of the light. A neural misfire from altitude and exhaustion. But I also took down the curtain rod from the closet and hung a blanket over the kitchen window before the sun set that second night. Superstition or no, I wasn't taking chances. The first 3 days established a rhythm. I woke at dawn, made coffee in the percolator, and left a slice of bread on the stump by the woodpile as per Rule 4. The stump was waist-high, flat-topped, and old enough that the growth rings had weathered into shallow, concentric grooves. The bread was always gone by mid-morning. I assumed birds or a fox, though I never saw tracks. I worked through the daylight hours, making progress on my illustrations. The fox in my story was learning to navigate by sound, echoes off trees, the rustle of prey, the warning calls of other animals. The irony wasn't lost on me. Up here, I was learning to navigate by rules I didn't understand, listening for sounds that shouldn't exist. The bell didn't ring again those first nights, and I started to relax. I even joked about it in my journal, day 4, still alive. No eldritch horrors. Fred Stump Fox is my only friend. Then Rio texted that he had a long weekend free and wanted to visit. I hesitated. Part of me wanted the solitude to continue, but another part missed easy human company. I said yes. He arrived on a Friday afternoon in a rented Subaru, snowshoes strapped to the roof and a flask of bourbon in his jacket. Rio is a structural engineer, 6'2", pragmatic to the point of being annoying, and my best friend since college. He took one look at the rule sheet on the corkboard and snorted. Mountain cosplay, he said. This is some Airbnb core bullshit. Do not look into the windows between 2:12 and 2:18 a.m. Why, because the owner's ghost jerks off at 2:15. I don't make the rules, I said. I just follow them. Do you, though? I didn't answer that. We spent the afternoon snowshoeing around the tarn. The ice was thick enough to walk on, but I didn't like the way it boomed underfoot, the sound traveling out in concentric rings like something was listening from below. Rio loved it. He stomped and slid, laughing, while I stayed closer to shore. At dusk, I went out to split kindling while Rio made chili on the propane range. When I came back inside, I noticed something wrong immediately. There was a slice of bread on the porch railing, not the stump. Rio. What? Did you put bread on the railing? He glanced over, wooden spoon in hand. Yeah, why does it matter? It's for birds, right? It goes on the stump. Leah, it's bread. I'm not participating in your landlord's weird little ritual. It's not a ritual, it's a rule. Same thing, I wanted to argue, but I also didn't want to sound unhinged. I went back outside, moved the bread to the stump, and scanned the timberline. Nothing moved, but the air felt different, expectant somehow. The silence had teeth. That night we stayed up late playing cards and drinking Rio's bourbon. He told me about a bridge project in Toledo, about his mother's hip surgery, about a date that had gone sideways when the guy revealed he collected toenail clippings. Normal, stupid human things. It felt good. I almost forgot about the rules. At 1 a.m. the eve bell rang once. We both froze. The sound hung in the air, singular and wrong. A moment later the porch light turned on by itself. Rio stood, frowning. Motion sensor? There's no motion sensor. Then it's on a timer. It's not on a timer. He walked to the door, unlocked it, and stepped outside before I could stop him. I wanted to shout, to pull him back, but my throat had locked. Instead, I grabbed the rule sheet and scanned it. After sunset, do not step off the porch unless the bell has rung exactly twice. 1 ring. Not 2. I forced myself to move. I went to the door, reached for the switch, and counted under my breath. 1, 2, 3. Rio was at the railing, leaning over, peering into the dark. There's nothing here. No sensor, no timer. Must be a short in the wiring. At 30, the chain sound rose from the timberline, not the slow sift from before, but a rapid, eager rattle. Hand from the direction of the tarn, something answered. A second rattle, lower and wetter, like chains dragged through mud. Rio jerked upright. What the fuck? 34, 35, 36. He turned toward me, eyes wide, and pointed down at the porch boards. Leah, I just saw 40. The sounds stopped. All of them. The wind cut out. The creak of trees went silent. Even the fire inside the cabin seemed to hold its breath. Rio stumbled back through the door, face pale, and slammed it behind him. He locked it with shaking hands. I saw my back, he said. I was standing at the railing, and I looked down, and I saw my own back walking ahead of me on the porch. Like I was already there, like I'd stepped off and kept going. I didn't say anything. I pinned the rule sheet flatter against the corkboard with a second thumbtack, as if that would help. Rio poured himself another bourbon. His hands were still shaking. Altitude sickness, he said. That's all. Low oxygen. We're at 9,200 feet. That's enough to cause hallucinations. I nodded even though I didn't believe him. That night I lay awake in the loft while Rio took the sofa. At 2:12 a.m., I closed my eyes and kept them closed until 2:19. Downstairs I heard Rio get up, walk to the kitchen, stop. He didn't say anything. Neither did I. In the morning the bread on the stump was gone. The slice he'd left on the railing 3 nights ago, the one I'd moved, was back. Not on the railing. On the porch boards directly below it, as if something had nudged it off and left it there as a reminder. Rio didn't joke about the rules again. After Rio left, earlier than planned, citing a work emergency that we both knew was a lie, I started reading the ledger in earnest. It sat on the kitchen table like a mundane artifact, marbled cover, sewn binding, pages thick enough to hold ink without bleeding. The entries spanned decades. The earliest dated back to 1983, written in a slanting, confident hand, Oct. 12. First snow. Stove drawers well. Saw elk at the tarn. 6 cows, 1 bull. No trouble. The next several pages were similar. Weather observations, grocery lists, notes about firewood consumption and wildlife. Ordinary. Then, halfway through the 1985 entries, the tone shifted. Feb 3, heard chains last night. Counted to 40, worked. Bread on stump gone by morning. Do not deviate. That was the first time the word bread appeared. No explanation. Just the assertion that it worked. I flipped forward. Different hands, different years, but the entries grew more specific. Nov 1991. Bell rang once at 11 p.m., did not go out. Heard footsteps on porch until 3 a.m. In morning, boot prints led to railing, stopped. No prints returning, John 1998. Forgot bread 2 days running. Third day, stove wouldn't light. Found kindling rearranged into a shape I didn't recognize. Left double portion on stump. Stove lit first match, Aug 2003. Hiker came at dusk. Asked my name 3 times, gave it. He repeated it back in my dead brother's voice. I didn't let him in. He stood on the porch until the bell rang twice on its own. Then he left. No footprints. I am not using my name again. The margins held even more. Penciled notes crowded and small as if written in haste. Bread on stump in a safe. Railing her invitation. If bell rings once, do not step out. It's asking. Chain rattle answers count. Finish the 40. Don't lose your number. If tarn fog reaches porch, say not for me and shut eyes till wind changes. Names given after dark travel too far. I read these over and over, cross-referencing them with the typed rules. The typed list was a summary, bare bones. The ledger was the operating manual. Between the pages I found a Polaroid, faded to yellow and blue. It showed the porch at night, lit by what I assumed was moonlight. But the shadows were wrong. They formed a second set of boards, overlapping the first at an angle that defied perspective, like a porch superimposed on itself, or a staircase leading somewhere the wood didn't go. On the back, in blue pen, don't trust the edges after midnight. Another loose note. This one on a torn piece of graph paper. Do not scrape ice from inside of glass. It's not ice. I thought about the kitchen window. The blanket I'd hung. The smile I'd seen. I made tea and sat at the table, ledger open, and tried to construct a logic. The rules were consistent. They didn't contradict each other. They layered. And they all pointed to the same conclusion. The basin was not neutral. It responded, it tested, and it remembered. At sunset I left bread on the stump. I turned on the porch light before the sky finished darkening. I stayed inside. At 9:32 p.m. the bell rang twice. I hadn't touched it. Neither had the wind. There was no wind. I walked to the door and looked out. The porch was empty. The bread was gone. The light glowed steady. I didn't step outside. Rule 1 said I could, not that I should. I went back to the ledger and added my first entry, day 8. Bell rang twice, unprompted. I did not go out. No consequence observed. Query, is the bells ringing an invitation or a boundary? I didn't know yet, but I was starting to understand that the rules weren't arbitrary. They were a covenant, and I was bound by it whether I'd agreed or not. On the 10th day, I woke to the sound of a snowmobile growling up the access road. I watched from the window as it crested the last switchback and stopped near the woodpile. The rider dismounted, pulled off a helmet, and revealed a woman in her 40s with a Forest Service patch on her jacket and a scar across her knuckles that looked like it had been made by something with teeth. She knocked 3 times, firm, spaced official. I opened the door. Cold air rolled in. Leah Moreno, she asked. Yes? Mara Valdez, Winter District Ranger. Wellness check. Hatcher called and asked me to drop by, make sure you're not frozen or crazy yet. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. She was already scanning the cabin interior. The wood stove, the ledger on the table, the rule sheet on the corkboard. Her gaze lingered on the rules. You following those? She asked. Yes. Good. She hefted a canvas bag off the snowmobile seat. Brought you groceries. Flour, rice, canned chili, coffee. There's a storm coming in Thursday. You'll want to be stocked. I took the bag. Thank you. She stepped onto the porch, boots squeaking on the cold boards, and looked up at the eave bell. She reached up and tested the clapper. It was wired shut with a twist of steel cable, corroded green. It shouldn't be ringing, she said quietly. It does, though. I know. She turned to face me. How many times? Twice, mostly. Once it rang once. Did you go out after the single ring? My friend did. Her expression tightened. Is he still here? No, he left. Good. She pulled a small notebook from her jacket and wrote something. Then she tore out the page and handed it to me. 2 handwritten rules. If the wind dies all at once, get low and keep your hands in your pockets. If a knock comes from under the floor, don't respond. I read them twice. Why aren't these on the main list? Because most people don't last long enough to need them. She capped her pen. The basin is old. Older than the forest, older than the names we gave the peaks. It learned patterns from the people who lived here before us. Ranchers, trappers, maybe others before that. It learned to mimic routines, sounds, faces. Mimic, I repeated, it listens. And it trades. You give it attention, it gives you answers. But the answers come in shapes you don't want. She glanced at the timberline. Don't negotiate. Don't try to understand it. Just follow the rules. What happens if I don't? She looked at me for a long time. So you become part of the pattern, Before she left, she checked the porch light fixture, tightening a connection I hadn't known was loose. "Keep this working," she said. "The light doesn't stop anything, but it makes the count easier. And the count matters. The 40 isn't arbitrary, it's a rhythm. The basin listens to rhythm. If you finish, it knows you're deliberate. If you lose your number, it knows you're afraid. What's the difference? Deliberate, it might leave you alone. Afraid, it engages." She started the snowmobile, then paused and looked back. "One more thing. If the wind dies, and I mean all at once, like a switch, get low. Don't offer your hands to catch yourself. Don't offer anything. Why? Because it'll take what you offer. And you won't get it back the same." The snowmobile growled down the slope, and I stood on the porch watching until the sound faded. Then I went inside and taped her 2 additional rules beneath the original 5. That night I lay in the loft and listened to the cabin. The stove ticked as it cooled. The timbers creaked. At 1:47 a.m., a single knock sounded from beneath the floorboards directly under my bed. 3 seconds later, it came again. Same spot, same weight. I didn't respond. I didn't move. I barely breathed. The knock came a 3rd time. Then silence. In the morning, I checked the crawlspace hatch in the kitchen floor. It was latched from the inside. The storm Mara had warned about arrived on Thursday and lasted 3 days. Snow piled against the north side of the cabin in a drift that reached the windowsill. I kept the fire going, worked on my illustrations, and rationed my propane. The wind screamed through the cliffs, and at night the basin seemed to contract, pressing in, waiting. On the 3rd night, the storm broke. The sky cleared to a black so deep the stars looked punched through. The temperature dropped. My breath fogged inside the cabin despite the fire. At 7:18 p.m., 3 knocks sounded at the door. Not frantic. Not desperate, polite, firm, glove firm. I froze at the table, stylus halfway to the screen. The knock came again. 3 beats, evenly spaced. I stood, walked to the door, and looked through the window. A man stood on the porch. Mid-30s, maybe. Beard iced white, eyes too wet, too reflective. He wore a down jacket and a beanie, and he held his left arm against his ribs like it was injured. He looked directly at the window. Directly at me. "Road washed out," he called, voice muffled by the glass. "Can I come in?" I didn't move. He smiled. Not unkind. "Just patient. What's your name?" he asked. Every nerve in my body lit. Rule 5. If a hiker asks for your name at night, say, "I am a guest." Nothing more. I opened the door 6 inches, keeping the chain latch engaged. Cold air poured through the gap. "I am a guest," I said. His smile held. "I know, but what's your name?" "I am a guest." He tilted his head. His breath didn't fog. "Leah," he said. In my mother's voice. Exactly her voice. The slight rasp, the way she rounded the vowel. Behind me, I heard Rio move. I hadn't realized he'd come back. But no, he hadn't. I was alone. The sound was just the cabin settling, or it was pretending to be Rio. The man on the porch smiled wider. "Can I come in, Leah?" I slammed the door shut and threw the deadbolt. Outside, the eve bell rang once. My heart lurched. 1 ring. Wrong number. I grabbed the broom from the corner, reached up and struck the clapper wire with the handle. Hard, twice. The bell rang again, clean and proper. 2 beats. Through the window, I watched the man on the porch. For a moment, he stood still. Then he blurred, a shimmer like heat above asphalt. And when my vision cleared, he was gone. No footprints where he'd stood. Just a long, smooth drag mark, like something heavy had been pulled sideways off the porch and into the snow. I turned on the porch light. I counted to 40 out loud, voice shaking. At 40, I stopped. Nothing answered. I checked the stump. No bread. I'd already left it that morning. I checked the railing. Empty. I checked the rule sheet, the ledger, Mara's additions. Then I sat at the table and wrote, "Day 13, hiker at door." Asked for name. Gave protocol answer. It said my name anyway in my mother's voice. Bell rang once. I corrected with 2 strikes. Figure blurred and disappeared. Drag mark leading into snow, no footprints. Query, how did it know my name? I have not spoken it aloud here. I stopped writing and looked at my phone. I'd texted Rio my name. I'd posted photos with location tags. I'd written my name in the ledger. The basin listened and it learned. Rio came back on the 16th day. I hadn't expected him. He texted from the access road. "I'm sorry." I shouldn't have bailed. I'm coming back. I told him not to. I told him it wasn't safe. He came anyway. This time he didn't mock the rules. He read the ledger. He read Mara's notes. He asked questions I couldn't answer. Why 40? Why bread? Why the windows between 212 and 218? I don't know, I said. But it works. So we follow it. That's not good enough, and it's all we have. On his second night back, the wind died. Not gradually. Not a lull. It cut out like someone had closed a door. The trees stopped moving. The cabin stopped creaking. Even the fire seemed to hesitate. I dropped to the floor immediately, hands in my pockets. Rio looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Get down, I hissed. Hands in your pockets, now. He hesitated, then dropped. We knelt on the floorboards, arms pinned awkwardly, as the silence stretched. It felt like the cabin was holding its breath, like the basin was leaning in. Then, from the direction of the tarn, fog began to rise. It didn't drift. It climbed, a wall of it, dense and low, moving uphill against gravity. I watched through the window as it crossed the snow, reached the porch steps and nosed at the first riser. Not for me, I said aloud. Rio stared at me. Say it, I snapped. Say it and close your eyes. Not for me, he whispered. I closed my eyes. The fog pressed against the door. I could feel it. Not temperature, not moisture, but a pressure like something leaning. I kept my hands in my pockets. I kept my eyes closed. I counted silently to 40 just for structure. At 38, the wind resumed. The trees sighed. The cabin creaked. When I opened my eyes, the fog was retreating down the slope, folding back toward the tarn like a blanket pulled off a bed. Rio's face was gray. What the fuck was that? I don't know. It was looking for something, I know, and we didn't give it. No, we didn't. That night I couldn't sleep. At 2:12 a.m. I closed my eyes and kept them closed. I heard Rio get up. I heard him walk to the kitchen. I heard him stop in front of the blanketed window. Don't look, I called down. I'm not. But I heard something else. A knock. From below the floor. Directly under the kitchen. 3 seconds later it came again. Rio, don't answer it. I'm not. His voice was tight. The knock came a third time. Then a voice, my voice, called up from the crawlspace. Rio, can you help me? I dropped something. Rio's breath hitched. That's not me, I said. I'm in the loft. That's not me. The voice came again, muffled by the floorboards, patient and familiar. Rio, please, I need help. He backed away from the hatch. He climbed the ladder to the loft and sat on the floor next to my bed, shaking. We didn't speak. We just waited. The knocking stopped at 2:18. The crescendo came on the 19th night. The sky had been strange all day. Low clouds, no wind, a stillness that felt like a held breath. At dusk, I left bread on the stump and watched as a jay landed next to it. The bird didn't eat. It just sat there, head cocked, looking at me. Its eyes were too dark, too steady. I went inside and locked the door. At 9 p.m. the chains started. Not from the timberline, from everywhere. A surround sound rattle, metallic and patient, as if the basin itself had threaded itself with iron and was testing the links. Rio stood at the window, staring. It's never done that before. No. At 9:47 the fog lifted from the tarn again. This time it didn't climb slowly. It rolled uphill like a wave, fast and purposeful. I turned on the porch light. I grabbed the broom. The eve bell rang once. I struck the clapper twice. The fog reached the porch steps. It pooled there, rising, curling against the risers like water seeking a drain. Not for me, I said. Rio echoed me. Not for me. The wind died. All at once I dropped, hands in my pockets. Rio followed. The fog pressed against the door. The windows. It tested the edges of the porch light's reach. The chain sounds quickened, eager, anticipatory. Then from the timberline a shape moved. I saw it through the window, framed in the light. Not a man, not an animal. A silhouette walking down the path toward the cabin. It had the wrong proportions, limbs too long, torso too short. Its gait was smooth like it was gliding. It stopped at the edge of the light. It waited. The bell rang once. Just once. I grabbed the broom and struck the clapper twice. The second ring echoed clean and sharp. The shape tilted its head. It didn't retreat. It just stood there, patient, while the fog climbed higher and the chains sifted faster. Everything was asking at once. I stood, keeping my hands loose at my sides, not reaching, not offering. I started counting aloud. 1, 2, 3, Rio joined me. 4, 5, 6. The shape took a step forward. 12, 13, 14. The fog touched the porch boards, sliding between the cracks. 20, 21, 22. The wind was still dead. The basin was listening. I could feel its attention like a weight on my sternum. 30, 31, 32. The chains stopped. Total silence. The shape stood motionless at the edge of the light. 38, 39, 40. The wind returned with a gasp. The shape blurred and collapsed inward, folding into itself like paper crushed by an invisible fist. The fog retreated down the steps, sliding back toward the tarn in a smooth, sullen wave. The porch light flickered and steadied. The chain sounds faded uphill, a scattering into the cliffs. I looked at Rio. His face was bloodless. We counted, I said. We didn't lose the number. It wanted us to. I know, that night neither of us slept. At 2:12 I closed my eyes. At 2:14 I heard a knock from beneath the floor. At 2:16 my own voice called up from the crawl space. Leah, I changed my mind. Let me in. I didn't answer. I kept my eyes closed. I counted to 40 just to have something to do. At 2:18 the knocking stopped. In the morning I found a ring of breadcrumbs on the stump, arranged in a perfect figure 8. I didn't photograph it. The ledger had warned against capturing patterns. Rio and I dismantled the bread he'd left on the railing days before. We scraped away the crumbs. We checked the porch boards for drag marks and found 3 leading from the door to the railing to the edge of the light's reach. We didn't follow them with our eyes. Dawn came the color of bone. The storm had scrubbed the sky to a blue so sharp it hurt to look at. The basin was silent, not the expectant silence of before, but something quieter. Tired, maybe. Or satisfied. Rio left that afternoon. Before he did, he added a note to the ledger, day 20. We counted to 40 during full engagement. The 40 held. Do not lose your number. Do not offer your hands. Do not answer your own voice. I added my own entry beneath his. The bell rang once. I corrected it with 2. The figure at the light's edge collapsed when we reached 40. The rhythm is not arbitrary. It is the boundary. Keep the rhythm. Keep the count. Then I wrote new rules on a separate sheet and pinned it beside the original 5. If the bell rings once, do not step out. If you must go out, ring it twice yourself before crossing the threshold. During wind cuts, keep hands pocketed. Do not touch the house, it answers touch. If fog climbs the steps, say, not for me, eyes closed, and wait. Do not offer your name, your hands, or help it didn't ask for air. If footprints fail, look for drag marks. Do not follow them with your eyes. 10. Count to 40 without losing your number. The count is the boundary. Finish it. Mara returned 2 days later on her snowmobile, carrying more supplies and a new propane canister. She saw the additions and nodded. Good, she said. She tapped the note about the figure 8 crumbs. It likes your counting. You're keeping rhythm, so it's engaging on your terms. That's better than most. Better how? You're still here. She checked the porch light, the bell, the stump. She looked out toward the tarn and the timberline, reading something in the landscape I couldn't see. 3 more weeks, she said. You'll make it. Just don't get comfortable. I'm not comfortable. Good. Comfortable is when it wins. After she left, I worked on my illustrations. The fox in my story had learned to navigate the forest by listening, not just to sound, but to the patterns in sound. The rhythm of wing beats, the interval of dripping water, the cadence of wind through specific trees. I realized I was writing the cabin. At sunset, I left bread on the stump. The bell rang twice unprompted. At 9:32 p.m. I didn't go out. I didn't need to. The ringing was enough. A confirmation, a boundary honored. At 2:12 I closed my eyes and walked the hallway with one palm on the wall, counting softly. A knock came from the kitchen floor, imitating the rhythm of my footsteps. I didn't respond. At 2:18 the cabin exhaled. I opened my eyes. Outside the basin waited, patient, intelligent, cruel in the slow way of old places. It had learned from ranchers, from trappers, from everyone who had tried to live here and failed. It had learned names and rhythms and the shapes of fear, but it had also learned the rules, and the rules were a contract. As long as I honored them, the basin would honor me. Not with kindness, not with mercy, but with a narrow bridge through a high waiting mouth. I could live with that. Hatcher's nephew, Jasper, arrived on the 27th day. He was early, 22, beanie, grin, college sweatshirt, and the kind of confidence that comes from never having been truly afraid. "This place is sick," he said, dumping his duffel on the sofa. "Hatcher said it's got vibes. I'm doing a semester remote. Gonna write my thesis up here. Total thorough energy." I showed him the wood stove, the propane range, the percolator. I showed him the ledger. I showed him the rules. He laughed. "This is like a horror movie." "Is this for real?" "Yes. Come on. I'm serious." He read the rules again, still grinning. "What happens if you break one?" "Don't." "But what happens?" I didn't answer. I just pointed to the ledger. "Read it, all of it. Then decide." He spent the afternoon flipping through the pages, his grin fading with each entry. By dusk, he was quiet. At sunset, I left bread on the stump. Jasper watched from the window. "Every day?" he asked. "Every dawn." "And it's always gone?" "Always." At 9:32, the bell rang twice. Jasper jumped. I didn't. "What do we do?" he asked. "Nothing." The bell rang twice. "That means the boundary is set. We stay inside. What if it rings once?" I handed him the broom. "You ring it twice yourself. Then you count to 40 before you do anything else." He held the broom like it was a foreign object. "Count to 40, out loud. Don't lose your number. The count is the boundary." At 11:47, the chain sound started. Jasper went pale. I turned on the porch light. "Count with me," I said. We stood at the door and counted together. 1 through 40, steady and clear. At 38, the chains quickened, testing. At 40, they stopped. Jasper exhaled shakily. "Jesus Christ, it listens," I said, "and it tests. If you finish the count, it knows you're deliberate. If you falter, it knows you're afraid. And if it knows I'm afraid, it engages." That night at 2:12, I woke him and made him close his eyes. We walked the hallway together, palms on the wall. The knock came from the kitchen floor, 3 beats mimicking our footsteps. Jasper flinched but didn't speak. At 2:18, we opened our eyes. "Every night?" he asked. "Every night." He didn't joke again. On my last morning, I packed my duffel and left the ledger open to a blank page. I wrote one final entry. Day 28, Leah Moreno, illustrator, departing, no breaches. No losses, the rules hold. Follow them exactly. Do not negotiate. Do not try to understand. The basin is patient. It will wait for you to falter. Do not falter. Count to 40. Keep your rhythm. Do not lose your number. I left the bread on the stump. I checked the porch light. I looked out at the tarn, the cliffs, the timberline. The basin looked back. Jasper drove me down the access road in his truck. As we descended, he kept glancing in the rearview mirror. "It feels like it's watching," he said. "It is. Will it always?" "As long as you're there." He was quiet for a long time. "And then how do you live like that?" I thought about the fox in my story, about navigating by rhythm, by listening, by learning the patterns of the forest. "You learn the rules," I said, "and you don't break them." In town, I bought a coffee and checked my phone. Messages from friends, from my ex, from people who thought I'd been on some kind of retreat. I didn't know how to explain what the cabin had taught me, that there are places older than understanding, that some agreements are written in something deeper than words, that survival is sometimes just the discipline of counting to 40 without losing your number. I finished my children's book 3 weeks later. The fox learns to navigate the forest by listening to rhythms, the pattern of rain, the interval of birdsong, the cadence of wind. In the final illustration, the fox stands at the edge of a clearing, ears pricked, while shadows move in shapes that don't quite match the trees. The book sold well. Reviewers called it quietly unsettling and unexpectedly wise. I didn't tell them where I learned it. Jasper texts me sometimes. Short messages. Bell rang once. I fixed it. Counted to 40. All good. Or fog came up last night. Said the words. Kit left, or I heard my mom's voice under the floor. I didn't answer. He's learning. The basin is patient. It listens, it tests. But if you keep the rhythm, if you honor the covenant, it will let you live. Just don't lose your number. Don't step off the porch unless the bell has rung. Twice. Don't look in the windows between 2:12 and 2:18. Leave the bread on the stump. Never the railing. If someone asks your name at night, say, I am a guest, and count to 40. Every time. Without fail, the basin is listening and it remembers everything.